Hi, y'all.
Kimari, I just want to start by thanking you again for joining us virtually. And it's always a pleasure to have you. I hope that, next time, maybe we can do this in person. Since, we're not that far away. We watched your video and we talked a little bit about your work on Tuesday, but just to give an actual introduction, Ms. Kimari Brand holds a BA in African and African Diaspora Studies from the University of Texas at Austin. She's a professional dancer, choreographer, artist, and model, as well as the founder and director of Twerk Scholars, where you can here, there, and everywhere take classes with her and learn from her in a variety of ways. She has a series of videos on a channel on YouTube and has been featured in the documentary Freezer as well if you want to see more of her work. Kimari, being the amazing individual that she is, I sent her some of the questions that you all had ahead of time, and she just sent me like detailed written answers to them. So, Kimari, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the questions that I said yesterday, and I'm apologizing for folks who sent me questions a little bit later. Those weren't on the list, but hopefully we'll have opportunities to ask additional questions that you can either ask directly or put in the chat. I think the first question that people had is, how did you decide to become a professional dancer, which is not an easy or simple career path?
Yeah, definitely. I truly love dancing, and I have a deep passion for it. And I come from a family of rhythm, so it's a natural talent and gift I decided to monetize on my own terms, and in particular spaces where twerking occurs, to expand on my initial Twerking for Empowerment research thesis.
I know from personal experience that trying to monetize something that you love is at once wonderful and can also be really challenging, right? When what gives you sustenance is also what you need to do to get literal sustenance in the form of cash. Students wanted to know more about specifically what pushed you to want to rebrand twerking, and what are your favorite and least favorite parts about working as a twerk scholar?
Yes, I always loved to dance, and I never had a bad experience from dancing. It always made me feel happy and free. So when I was studying abroad in Bluefields, Nicaragua, I'm muted. Oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. I always loved to dance, and I never had a bad experience from dancing. It always something that made me feel happy and free. So when I was studying abroad in Bluefields, Nicaragua, we visited an island where the economy wasn't very developed and the schools were underfunded, and the schoolgirls shared that they never really get tourists to visit, and whenever they do get tourists, they'll put on their little cultural outfits and do dances for some of them, and maybe they might give them some money or like a little tips here and there. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, something similar occurs with me in the United States, working in the strip clubs. And at times when I'm doing twerking in the strip club and I feel like there's foreigners or people who come in who may not be familiar with my culture observing me doing it and tipping me for it. And there's an actual place for that in the United States. And they don't even have strip clubs in Nicaragua. I remember talking to one of the natives, and while doing my research, this guy named Hassan, he was like, yeah, we're not that corrupt out here in Nicaragua to be having strip clubs. So I thought that was interesting. I really, I didn't like that it was seen in a negative light in a way, but I can't control other people's perspectives or opinions. I can only share my opinion and perspective, and I love to see it I see it as a talent and special skill and gift from God that should be expressed and respected always, like the music artist Lauryn Hill. She has a song called, it's actually like an interlude, but one of her albums is like the MTV Unplugged series. And she says that it's like we think that the gospel is going to church and going to a church buildings, and that's deception. You know, the real gospel is repent, which means let go of all the crap that's killing you. Life is supposed to be a pleasurable experience, not this torment, you know. And when I realized that I was tormenting myself, it was about my lust. It wasn't about things that I needed. It was just, you know, all the security blankets. I mean, the more I acquired, the more I became more of a prisoner. I mean, you know, 40 people on staff and you can't do nothing. You know, creativity is impossible because all you can think about is these folks, and, you know, they're supporting and caring, and, you know, it's not good. Everybody, you know, a friend of mine says that every tub has to stand on its own bottom, you know, and in that respect, we all get to do what our passion is. And see, that's what praising God is all about, doing your passion. So when she says that praising God is about doing your passion, and I think that's a part of what you're naturally talented and gifted to do, something that you're passionate about. So as a natural big booty girl, and always having the gift of booty and the talent of intuitively knowing how to move my body and harmonize it to the music, I love observing that about myself and others in every form. And I've seen all types of people twerking to date, from white European descent, grown cowboy men have taken my classes, and to midgets, or, you know, big body black men and skinny ones alike, all kind of body types and shapes and sizes. And it's a pleasure to witness the manifestation of people using twerking to empower themselves and be free, and not just black women. And I don't really appreciate the demeaning memes and narrative people put out to frame twerking in a negative light of disgust or any sort of negativity. I just dismiss it with expeditiously.
I'm sorry to go off script a little bit, but it's interesting because I didn't tell you that we discussed this on Tuesday, but we were looking at a documentary about Nanny and the Maroons, and one of the things it included was ritual dance from Jamaica, right? Which is a lot of hip-based movement, because that's what ritual dance often is, right? And we were talking about the differences between African diaspora spiritualities that understand that all parts of bodies are sacred, right? That it's not, you know, that there's not a part of your body that you should be ashamed of or hide, that everything, we're all children of God, right? And that there's a certain kind of, there's a certain conservative interpretation of Christianity that at the same time was teaching, like the same time period, right, in the 1800s, was teaching that you could tell that black women were depraved because their butts were too big. And I'm always like, first of all, haven't you ever met a white woman with a big butt, or like a black woman? So I don't know what you're thinking, but also that that the different understanding of that if more, let me put it another way, that if more people had an understanding of the sacredness of the whole body that's part of African diaspora ways of knowing, maybe people would understand dance in a different kind of way. So I just wanted to, because, you know, you came so on point for the discussion that you didn't know we had on Tuesday. And I just wanted to pause for a moment to see if anybody had a follow-up question before we go on. And you can feel free to put it in the chat as well. Okay. And somebody did have a question, I know, about ways that you see learning how to twerk empower people and different body types. Are there any other stories that you'd like to share to inspire those of us who may be shy to join your classes?
Yeah. Absolutely. On Instagram, on my Twerk Scholars page, I follow on the people that we're following. You can just go there and just go through the list of people that we follow and see all the different twerk instructors. There's so many. There's like many different learning and training processes for twerking. The classes are unlimited, online and in person. You could likely find one near you today. But there's definitely been a lot of women monetizing the movement with excessive amounts of content and class courses with study kids. There's a good number of Black teachers who teach in person and online classes, and you can get in touch with them, set up private one-on-one courses or do beginners twerk classes, which is something I like to offer personally, and teach different American styles of twerking, from like the Dutty wine of the Caribbeans to the hula hoop movements of the Pacific Islands to bobbing in Chicago and like red nosing and yiking in California. These are all different like names of twerk movements, like the New Orleans bounce even. So like just going from coast to coast and teaching those different types of styles of twerking, American twerk styles that I know and have experienced personally. And I've even met a lot of music artists and great music twerkers, and the girls who were twerking with Miley in 2013 at that DMA performance that blew things up. Like, there's so many people who've been teaching this craft, and you can definitely find them.
And some students had questions about whether or not you face any backlash at UT when you learning twerk scholars, or specifically from folks at the university or in the academy.
Yeah, I honestly had an easier time starting the program up in my school, I think, because of Miley. I've never been upset with her personally, or just the way that it was framed, or that she was framed. I'm actually grateful for her, and it's like she's an ally to my research because of her and the few Black women who are twerk instructors. But the masses now, they know about twerking, and even then, like right after I finished my research, that was in 2013, and right after that I came back to the US and Miley was on every TV screen in the airport. I was just like shocked. I couldn't believe it. And for 2 weeks straight, she was on the TV. And I was telling people, oh, everybody's gonna know about twerking, you know. My professor was like, oh no, I don't know about that. We'll see. And then, next thing you know, I there wasn't as much backlash from the institution, I think, as there were from other Black women and men, maybe, who write in our culture and in the news. So I just would try not to respond to it. I think I did have moments where I responded maybe a little bit out of anger, but then I realized, I really can't control other people's perceptions. I just have to keep doing me and what makes me happy.
Thank you so much for saying that. I think sometimes it's important to decide not to respond to the backlash. And I think, somebody was just having a conversation with me, like, well, how do you convince Black people who are homophobic?
Hey, y'all a little loud.
And my answer is, like, I don't really have time for that, right? Like, they can do that or not do that. But if we keep trying to convince people who don't see the value in what we're doing, then we lose out on opportunities to develop what we want to develop, right? Like, and to push the dance skills further and to push the conversation further, because you're always responding to people instead of starting conversations, right? So I really appreciate that, right? That use of your time. People also wanted to know, since you work between California and Texas, what are the differences you see in those spaces and how your work is received, but also how you work in those spaces?
Twerking absolutely changes from state to state, and the experience of it as well. For instance, in the Bay Area, in San Francisco State University, I was studying the politics of the dance floor and the relationship between, hold on, can y'all be quiet, please? The relationship between people's partnership on the dance floor and how that is interpreted into the real world versus like in Texas, where you might go to a party or a nightclub and the couple dancing is different than it is in even Nicaragua. Like, but there's still couples dancing, and even what's appropriate for couple dancing, whether it's man and man or woman and woman or man and woman. And in the Bay Area, the men and the women are dancing back and forth with each other, like they're really getting it, like they're, whoa, everybody's moving back. And I wasn't used to that. I grew up in parties in Texas where the girls are doing all the work. The guys just standing there, they're getting twerked on at the party, and the girls are just wild, and they might have to fall back and let all their guys come and hold them up. And it's like, wow, you know, these guys are lazy compared to these California guys at the parties, and they're really like giving me a challenge. Like, they're back and forth with me, and that's a different kind of energy. And I thought about that in perspective to how Californians are, and even Nicaraguans. When I was in Nicaragua, they had this soul dancing movement where you dance face to face with each other, really close, and you know, the Caribbean kind of dirty wine, and it's really intimate. And that dance is usually done with, you know, somebody that you're sexually partnered with or intimate with. And you know, just observing these different kind of dances and the movements and trying to adapt in different places. It's really interesting. For sure.
Thank you for that. I don't often hear Black people from the South say have a lot good to say about the way that California Black people are different. So that was like real. That's a cultural difference I can be proud of. Okay. So the next set of questions, I'm gonna skip any questions that are about how you respond to like haters, right? Because we already know you're too busy for that. So there is a question about how you feel like the over-sexualization of twerking may or may not be related to racism. And one student commented on the one hand, and I sent this to you, that they feel like when someone like Miley dances, it gets a different reaction than, say, Meg Thee Stallion or Cardi B. Where another student commented to me later that they are wondering if, in fact, the new popularity of people like Meg Thee Stallion and Cardi B and Doja Cat and all of this is in fact ends up being supportive of your work. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you feel like the over-sexualization may or may not be related to race.
I'm not sure if it truly is. It could be. I think it just really depends on your personal perspectives and the channels that you choose to assign to, and the narratives you engage and reproduce and perpetuate. I personally follow pages that praise twerking. So someone who would have to go out of their way to send me a bad article or narrative around it. Like, I unfollow people with negative opinions about Meg Thee Stallion or artists like Shinsia with their new single Lick. I saw a personal trainer from Ghana, this African guy that I was following, and he's like back and forth from the States, and he was talking down on Shinsia, like shaming her in his story one day on Instagram. And I was just like, excuse you? Stick to the teaching workout classes. Why are you even talking about this right now? Like, wait a minute. And he was saying that it was bad for children, but he has a choice to protect what his children sees instead of shaming Shinsia for her mass publicity and rise to stardom via over like sexualization or lyrics and dances. But just because it may be seen over sexual doesn't mean that there's no other benefactor or any other way to see it. Like exotic or erotic art, adult content, sure, that's just video example is very suggestive, but it also points out to the person in power their sexuality. And the only person who could be mad at that is one in loss of control of their own.
It does seem like there's this kind of, it's easy for people to say either something is sexual or it's culturally valuable, right? And intellectual and spiritual. And why can't these things be all at once, right?
Sex is culturally valuable. If sex sells.
And like the thing about children that somebody else also brought up, like I think, we also were reading, this article that we were reading talks about Black girls' ring games, right? Like in all the dances that girls play where they learn how to shake their backsides with other Black girls, right? And it can be sexual, it can be fun, it can be all the things, right? And I think that it's unfortunate that so many people still try and limit, like, it's cultural or it's sexual. And really fortunate that, like, you have mastered, like, the unfollow, right? Because because as you're saying, like, there's this kind of really capacious community of people who want to have these conversations with you and share, like, pushing this further instead of taking elements away from it, right?
Yeah. Plenty of people praise twerking and Black women for twerking just the same as they have for Miley. It just depends on where you look and the topic you want to push and stand for personally. Like, maybe a lot of people don't get that opinion because they're often bombarded with social media and news headlines, and you don't get the whole truth and nothing but it, but you also get a chance to decide how you feel about it. But you don't get a chance to decide how you feel about it before you're being told how to feel. So I completely understand the views of societal opinions, but can you really genuinely or accurately gauge that, Say, for instance, like white Russian women banning Black women from teaching twerking in Russia, like a couple years ago. I did an interview with this girl, Twerkology Nation. She's on our Instagram, and she was telling me about this problem in Europe where they won't let Black women teach twerk classes because they're saying, oh, it started in Russia, and yeah, you guys aren't qualified to teach this. And she's like, oh my God, I can't teach classes, I'm African, I'm Black, I'm European too, but help. Tell them we started this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I got you, here's my research. But, what is that gonna prove when you have other people in power pushing their narratives, paying for Google ads, and now the first thing you search when you see twerk is a white woman teaching twerking instead of maybe the true source of where it comes from.
I had never heard it that twerking came from Russia. That's a new one.
It was a thing. It was a definite thing that she was having to fight for and advocate against.
That's intense, because twerk does not sound like a Russian word to me, but
they are on it heavy.
Wow. I like, kind of going further with this, people had questions about how you felt about mainstream twerking.
Oh yeah. Go for it. Wait, what is that? Like, mainstream twerking is mainstream now? That's the thing? Like, oh my God, it's still a thing? I think that's great. Like, my work remains relevant through time. Mainstream twerking? I'm definitely going for it. I've been working in Hollywood for the past year or two, doing music videos and wearing an Afro wig, so that people can get used to seeing Afro girls in videos, music videos, instead of us having to wear these curly, long Puerto wigs or straight hair. That's not really how it grows out of our heads, but we've been taught that that's what it is to be beautiful, this European beauty standard. So I'm trying to, engage this Black beauty standard, and it's been up. It's been working. I've been seeing more and more people, even younger artists coming up, and they are into that aesthetic. They're into the natural look, and I appreciate that.
Maybe building on this, because what you're talking about twerking specifically as a Black feminist politics, right? Like a Black feminist politics. And so can you say more about any challenges you may have faced with people who don't understand twerking as empowerment, or twerking as an art form or a politics? And I feel like this happens with twerking, but it happens with art forms in general, right? Like there's a different understanding of what it means to be political. Protesting in the street, right? Versus moving in other kinds of ways. Oh my gosh, really?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had backlash from my own family at times trying to prove the value of my research to like my dad. It was pretty difficult getting him to believe in my work and understand the long-term goals I had for it. So it's definitely been a challenge trying to prove him wrong. And to even my professor who initially inspired my research proposal to begin with, I guess I've always been a little rebellious. Bought sense is better than taught sense. My grandma always said that. But I definitely have had moments where I felt like stripping was not empowering, but maybe twerking could still be empowering. And I understood what my professor meant by not stripping as a form of impact on respectability politics and people writing raw for sex and over sexualization of sex work and not seeing anything else but that. And if they see you in that light, then the least you could do is show other lights. And I've worked with different identities and stage names to maneuver through my name and reputation being disempowered. But I also have my own ideas and experiences with stripping as a form of empowerment in dance and work, but also seeing how twerking goes into those strip club politics. And I made a lot of money doing it, way more than I would have doing a regular 9-to-5 job, so I can't rationalize having a more boring job and hating moments in that than an overly exciting one I enjoy for so long. But beauty does fade in time wears and on the body, so different accidents occur over time too. People have been crippled, they haven't been able to dance. There's been different women, but a lot of women I know and have seen, they dance into their late 40s or just, stick around and work until retirement. But some girls, they get in and they don't know how to have goals or what the end goal is. And I try to engage with different girls in my work too, and in different clubs that I've worked in, and making relationships with different women to encourage goals, because maybe they haven't gone to college or had an experience with higher education or know how to have goals or something to look forward to in the future besides their immediate situation that they're trying to get out of, and they're using dancing to do it. So there's definitely a lot of other families and communities to build and people to reach out to, and sort of like protect yourself in the industry. But yeah, my professor, I remember when I told her, I was like, oh, these people, they don't have any money. I think I just want to go back to the US and start stripping again, come back out here, buy some land, build the economy up. And she's like, no, don't do something that's disempowering to yourself to empower somebody else. And I was just like, what? I'm over here looking at music videos of Lyric Galore and Malaya Michelle, all these beautiful black women twerking in these clubs with bikinis on. They're not even naked. They got on bikinis. And all this money is being thrown on them. I don't see nothing disempowering about that. I got to go see, and I got to see what that's about. So that's what I've been doing. And it's been interesting.
I feel like there's a lot of generational stuff, right? That different folks from different generations understand what empowerment looks like differently. And I'm not like, it's hard, like, I feel like it's hard being a black woman in any profession, right? Like, you can work at McDonald's, you can work in the White House, right? Racism and sexism are gonna follow you wherever you go. And there are a lot of, like, any kind of dance. I look at these amazing black women gymnasts that we have, right? Like, you're gonna retire when you're in your 20s, right? Because that's the nature of a lot of really skilled physical labor. And so thinking about how, we can see this as like, this is something that is a valuable form, and then like other kinds of work, sometimes you have to transition, not like rise above, or, right? Like you move from side to side, and people have always also told me, like, there seems to be a lot of racism and sexism in the academy. Why didn't you get another job? And I'm like, where am I gonna go? Right? Like, where am I gonna go? If you know where I can go where there's no racism and sexism, I'm there tomorrow.
I'm there.
So change our workplaces instead of changing our work, right? Both things are hard, but one seems to me like a project that's going to make our lives a little bit better. Students also had questions about how you find dance-based resistance to be different from other forms of political resistance, and specifically how it may resonate differently for Black women.
Oh, wow. I really think that dance-based resistance has given voice to the voiceless and made the unseen and unheard more desirable to be heard and seen. Like in my video, I think that you guys watched, where I'm like teaching a lesson in Black feminism while twerking, I was purposefully spoke to the subconscious mind while using the dance to draw attention to the message. Even if they couldn't hear clearly because of the lust of the eye drowned out by their hearing, in the least the message was stick in their subconscious mind, along with the flashes of the images of the Black women in history like Sarah Bartman, and whose stories are told from a sad perspective, but in comparison is like the thief of joy. Have you guys ever heard that before? And I find a lot of joy in my work and focusing on that and that only. I think it's really important for me. Black women have to protect themselves in their work and their joy and happiness, and experience it differently than many white women in the nation, I'm sure, because it is more dangerous for us in the streets. Like, I literally can't even walk the streets of LA at night before somebody's pulling over trying to like get me in their car or kidnap me or something. Uber everywhere. But yeah, it's we have to protect each other too in different ways, as much as we can. And to my experience, I've prayed for my protection consistently, and I'm sure my family carries a faith and spirit of protection and peace that surpasses understanding that, and that could definitely go over most intellectuals' heads. But then, hey, not everyone will get it, and that's okay. It could be more dangerous for sure for Black women, and especially young Black girls whose sexualities are now designed by social media influence, and that doesn't exclude the same influence on girls and women from other races who feel pressure to be Black maybe, or look or take on Black features like big lips and butts and hips. And I'm a body positive activist personally, just because I've seen different sides of my body's influence on others, and I know there's power there. Because I've been big and I've been skinny, and either way, I'm still loving myself and trying to, even though I may get different reactions to it. I think there's a lot more power in African and Black African women's that they hold in their ability to create roads and mobilize movements and influence white women. Maybe even if it's behind the scenes, like, you know, a ghostwriter. Maybe Black women don't want all the fame and glory, or men or whoever's, you know, the source that may not always be getting the credit for their work. But yeah. The movements that you guys are currently studying right now, I think more and more Black women are becoming more and more free, like every day. And it's been coming. It's been a long time coming, but I think it's definitely approaching and here now.
You know, since the 2016 election, one of the things I've been thinking about more and more is maybe it's not the time for Black people and Latinx folks to be putting our bodies on the front lines, right? That now is a good time, on the one hand, for a variety of folks, we're sometimes called allies, right? Like to be, not take over things, right? But for other bodies to be on the line as well. And for women of color in particular, like claiming our bodies.
There's so many different ways that it happens. I mean, I remember being at UT and coming back from my research, and this African girl, she's like first generation African, she came up to me and she's like, "Oh, Kimari, I can do your class now. Miley's doing it." And I'm like, yes, you can, girl. Yes, you can. I was so glad that she found freedom